All right, everybody, welcome to Virtual Bourbon. My name is Steve Akeley. I own a company called the ABV Network, and we've got a fun event tonight. We're going to be talking about the capabilities that we have for private tasting. So we're talking about groups, parties, corporate events, that type of thing. We'll get into that in just a second. Before we get to that, I want to tell you a little bit about my company and about myself, and I'll have my two co-hosts introduce themselves as well, and we'll tell you a little bit about who we are and how we can help you with what you are looking to do in terms of a tasting event. So my company, the ABV Network, is a bourbon media company, and we also do live events as well. And we've got into these virtual meetings over the last year as COVID times, if you will. And it has been a great opportunity for us to expand our audience for the other things that we do, as well as utilize some of our expertise and draw on some of our friends from the world of bourbon to co-host events with us and those type of things. And recently we've expanded out into these private tastings as well. So if you want to learn more about the company, just head over to abvnetwork.com. You can see that we have several podcasts. Two of them are in the top 3 on iTunes. That is The Bourbon Show, which is a serious look at the world of bourbon. We do 2 big interviews per month. And then we've got one called The Bourbon Daily, which is a lighthearted look at the world of bourbon. And that comes out literally every day. Again, my name's Steve Akeley. I'm a bourbon fan for 30 plus years. Maybe longer than that. Family didn't drink much, but they did like bourbon. And when I started, drinking in college, once I turned 21, I enjoyed my first taste of whiskey, and it was as good as I had hoped it would be. So I was a bourbon fan, just like my family, and that's what I drank through the rest of my college times. And after that, I continued to drink bourbon just as a fan. And mostly that drinking bourbon meant literally Jim Beam White Label. I didn't really expand upon that a whole lot. I would time to time buy some different bottles and taste some different things, but not really a whole lot until the year 2000. I had saw an article online that they opened up something called the Bourbon Trail and took my family to that. And we toured the 7 distilleries that were part of the Bourbon Trail at that time. And I was then totally into it. I love the idea of the world of bourbon. I liked the history. I liked seeing the production. I liked meeting some of the people from the world of bourbon when I went to the distilleries. And again, that's very early on. They had only been doing that for about a year at that time, opening up for tours. And it just changed everything for me. And eventually I would decide that it would be something that I wanted to do part-time while I was continuing to work my corporate job, and something that I could build up to in retirement and work in the world of bourbon, doing the media company thing, blogs and podcasts and those type of things. And ultimately, a decision was made for me that I was no longer going to work for the company that I worked for when they had some corporate layoffs. And I took a chance with my buyout package to get into the world of bourbon, and I haven't looked back. So that happened in July of 2017, launched the company in 2016, again, looking to do things part-time. And then in 2017, I got laid off and expanded the company and done nothing but this full-time since July of 2017. So very cool stuff. I want to do a same type of thing, and a little self-introductions for my other 2 team members. Tim, we'll start with you. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sounds great. Thanks, Steve. So first off, I met Steve in September 2019 at one of our friend distilleries as an odd coincidence, meeting. They're just going for a tour. That would have been my 3rd time down to Kentucky for trying some new things, because I've been to most of the larger distilleries. But I started my bourbon journey in 2002 when I started traveling for work out of college. Before then, it was Jack and Coke, which I thought was great until we got sophisticated and switched to Jim Beam White Label and Sprite. So that got really sophisticated when we were trying to be on high class as we moved up into through college. But in 2002, I was traveling around, and when you're traveling by yourself, you end up getting comfortable traveling by yourself after a while, and you start going out to the bars, start meeting people, and had a number of bartenders walk me through all across. I could probably go down there, probably still working there right now, all the different hotels I've stayed at across the country. I started with vodka gimlets, and then in the Frontenac Hilton in St. Louis is when the bartenders said, "Hey, why don't you try some of this stuff? It's called Maker's Mark. If you like vodka gimlets, you like something sweet, I like Maker's Mark will do it for you. It'll be great." So I fell in love with Maker's Mark and became an ambassador the next day. And then I walked through that whole program, two barrel cycles over 12 years. And I've been with Maker's Mark, just being a big super fan with them forever. And then I started traveling from there to 2007. Did the Kentucky Bourbon Trail with my brother the first time. We had so much fun in 2000. 2010, we did it for his bachelor party with some more folks brought down and tried some new distilleries and hopped around the original ones that we saw to see how the growth was going. And then one of my other cousins was getting married and said, I want to go to Kentucky as well. So my colleague here who's working, he's also a family member. We ended up going down for that bachelor party in 2016, I want to say it was, for another trip of the Bourbon Trail. And then ever since then, since about 2018, it's once a year, if not trying to be twice a year, getting down to Kentucky, trying new distilleries, especially on the craft side. And then in addition to that, I also have a love for Scotch whiskey, Irish whiskey, and other world whiskeys as well, including Canadian. So I've got a passion for each of the different styles, no matter where they come from, due to the transparency of the different styles. And then in the last couple of years, decided to start solidifying some of the knowledge that I have with some certifications and became an executive bourbon steward this year. I was a certified bourbon steward with the Stave and Thief Society in 2018. And I've also have a passion for craft tobacco and tobacco products. I became a certified consumer tobacconist in 2021 as well. So I do pair different foods as well as cigars, different experiences with different spirits across the board, and like the unique abilities of the different distillers, their artwork and what they do, and then what all comes into a barrel and the magic that comes out of it is what really just impresses me, along with the history.
Yeah. Well, good meeting you and our other guest, as you mentioned, your cousin, Patrick. Patrick, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for covering, guys. My internet cut out on me. I was like, oh, man. Here we go. So my name is Patrick. I'm only 29 years old, so I've only been drinking whiskey for about 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. In college, I stuck mostly to beer. I never really even thought about trying whiskey. I have to blame my cousin Tim for getting me into it. I mean, you look at his beautiful home bar behind him, right? It's hard not to want to take a seat when you're visiting at Thanksgiving and let him host a tasting for you. So like you mentioned, we went down to the Bourbon Trail, and that kind of solidified my interest in bourbon and whiskey. I'm a big history guy, and I like reading up on science too, and bourbon has a lot of those elements in it as well. I kind of love the fact, when you open a bottle, one of my favorites, say Russell's Reserve 10-year, that you're drinking something that's 10 years old. It's like you're drinking through, a decade. I find that really interesting. But as my bourbon journey progressed, I kind of went the normal route. I wanted to go find all the Buffalo Trace products, go find some Weller, go find some Blanton's, try to hunt down some of the bigger brands, and was successful with some, others not so much. But now within the past couple of years, I've become more interested in the craft whiskey scene. I think there's a lot of innovation going on in the craft whiskey scene. I love learning about it. Now, like Tim, we've solidified our knowledge with being executive bourbon stewards, and through the pandemic, got this tasting business off the ground. And we just love sharing our passion for bourbon with everybody.
Yeah. Well, we're going to tell you today a little bit about the types of parties and things like that we can do, the tasting events. So we'll get into that. We'll talk a little bit about pricing. We'll get into, the process. How would you engage us if you're interested in talking about more, and what we can do in terms of customization. We'll have an open time at the end for Q&A. And of course, we're doing a drawing. We're going to give someone that's on the call here a party for 15. So you can invite 14 friends, and it'll be hosted by the team here, and they will run you through that. So again, Tim and I met randomly in 2019 at Neely Family Distillery. So I like to hang out there when I'm in Kentucky. I go to Kentucky a lot. I think that's what's made my way in the world of bourbon, is the fact that I dedicated myself to spending a lot of time in Kentucky. And I thought the important thing was to go to distilleries, meet the people there, but then also attend events in Kentucky. So I had a heavy influence and spent a lot of time there and made sure I attended all the events, met the right people. And that's helped the company grow. And we really have access that really no one else does. And of course, we are also into the craft whiskey. So it's not just the big heritage brands. We like everybody. And it's not just Kentucky. We like distilleries across the US, and we try to forge as many relationships as we can. But after meeting Tim, he got involved with my company. We have a couple ways you can get involved. We've got a club and Patreon and all those type of things. And Tim got involved in that. And, so once he became involved, at that point he was a listener and those type of things. But when the pandemic hit, which of course is, you hate to ever say anything good comes out of that because it was a terrible time. But what came out of that is we started doing these virtual events, and Tim started to attend those and became a regular at those. And he recruited Patrick, like he recruited him to drink bourbon. He recruited him to start coming on our events. So we kind of got to be good friends. And then Tim was branching out a little bit, on his free time. These two were doing some tasting events and things like that. And I was also doing some of that as as well. But it took up a lot of my time, and I stay pretty busy with all the things that we do with the media company, and I just didn't have time to coordinate all those, and it wasn't really something that I wanted to get involved in. So I talked to Tim and Patrick here about, could you guys do what you're doing independently? And there is some benefit to us because we have the contacts in the bourbon industry, because we have an established website and a presence in the world of bourbon. There's some merit for you guys. And of course, the merit for me, what happens good for me is I can engage two people that are educated. They've invested in resources to become certified and trained in these type of things. And of course, I had some success already doing that. And it was a great opportunity for me to offer this to, again, another audience that hopefully grows the core. It's always about the core audience that we have, building our podcast up, our blogs, and all those type of things. And everything helps one another. If we get someone to listen to the podcast, they might do a tasting with us, or if they do a tasting, they might listen to the blog. So it's always about how can we do things that really expand our audience. And I thought this was a great way to do it. So I talked with these guys, and they said that they would be very interested in that. So that gets us with the types of parties. Tim and Patrick, why don't you tell us about some different ideas? Start, I guess, start on just somebody in this audience here. Maybe they've got a birthday party coming up, a big number, 50, 60, 40, whatever it is, and want to get a group together, or it's a birthday or family event, reunion type of thing. What can you guys do for individuals? And then we'll talk about companies, what that might look like as well.
Sure. So we've done parties for small family holiday gifts to get people together. The pandemic obviously has kept us apart, but we can stay together via this technology, which is great. But the problem is how do you get all the logistics covered to do something like that? And that's some of the things that we pick up. So one of our packages is a 5-spirit blind tasting of 5 different whiskeys, not just bourbon. So we'll do a Scotch, we'll do a Canadian, we'll do an Irish, we'll do an American rye, and then we'll also do it a bourbon as well. So we blind taste it through random numbering, because we found going 1 through 5 brings some bias in there, going A through E gives some bias in there. So we do a random numbering for each tasting that we have, and we rotate out the whiskey, so it's not always the same thing. So what we tend to do is, from family parties, we've had a group of 10 connecting people all across the country. We've also had individual events of 15 to 20, just friends getting together, bourbon clubs, whiskey clubs wanting to get education on that. And on top of that, we've also done a few fundraisers for charities as well, which is a whole new market that we didn't even think about until somebody approached us and said, we'd like to do a fundraiser. What's your price? And how much can you give us room on the ticket pricing? And the pricing that we have for some of our flagship events is reasonable for T&E expenses, for travel expenses, for families trying to do gifts together. So they're not spending a lot of money, but you're also getting a quality event. So the value is definitely there. And the real hard part is getting the logistics for everything, getting everything packaged together, and everything comes in a 50 milliliter sample. We send 50 milliliter samples, all with security caps. So if you think about going on the airplane and you're popping that cork for the first time, popping that cap for the first time, everybody's going to get their same identical samples, all in that security cap. So we keep that tight. But we handle all the logistics from the technology through the shipping, and making sure everything gets to you in the right way, in the safe way, or how you see fit. So some folks are local, want to do virtual local, or they want to do in person, as folks are getting in person now. So the number for the smaller parties, the minimum size we have is 15. So you basically are purchasing with the package, you're purchasing 1 bottle each, since we're doing 50 milliliter samples. And that's why we usually start a minimum of 15. But it all depends on a family party or something like that. We'll definitely do something smaller for those unique events.
Yeah. Everything that we talk about today in terms of pricing and what's established, that's the base. And we try to stick to that as much as possible, but we're also not so stiff that, hey, this is what it is and we won't do anything else. If you've got an idea, talk to us, and we certainly can go through and customize everything that we've got. But I think that's one of the problems that I had when I was doing this myself. I was doing some of these events. I didn't have anything. I said, let's just talk. And it's just too all over the place. There's so many possibilities, different ways to do it. And, it was just email after email going back and forth. And then they were talking to their boss and then coming back wanting to change something. And it just was nonstop negotiation. So that's why we've got our base. And we'll talk about that when we get into the pricing and those type of things. But know that even as we talk about that, things are customizable. Of course, the other big thing that you guys do, and you really are perfect for this, that's if you own a business and maybe you want to get your team together, a bonding type of thing, or maybe you've got a customer event, a way to ingratiate yourself with a bunch of customers by coming off very professionally. You guys do stuff with that as well, right, Tim?
Correct, we do. So we've done events where a business will hire us and bring all of their vendors in as a thank you event for the year, for year-end planning, holiday parties, as well as just a quarterly get together. So we're on the list for a few different companies to rotate back, especially when they rotate in person. One example we did a party for that where the business brought in each of their different vendors and saying thank you. They actually rented out a bar, private space at a bar, plugged us into the audio system and all the TVs, and we're going to be virtual, taking them all through a tasting. But they're all having a great time getting food served and everything like that. So it's not necessarily just from the comforts of your home, but from a business side, what is unique with this format is you have the ability to be able to not rent that hall, not rent that private space, save on costs there, so you can go a little more upscale on an Uber Eats credit, so you can send dinner to them in addition with the tasting and really make it an event. And I think with the corporate side, especially, is with all events we do, we always send a follow-up summary to the host so they can kick that over to different participants. We want them to send it about 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, because that's when people are getting off of work and they remember the experience from last night. And then that summary includes all the whiskeys that we tasted, because they may not have remembered what they tasted. As we've got a tasting sheet that comes along with the package, so people are taking notes as they're going. But we also talk about the different education points that were brought up during that meeting, and we summarize those points up. Like we talked about pot still versus column still. What are the differences? We talked about the difference between a Scotch and an Irish whiskey. What's malted or unmalted barley? So these different technical questions that come up, we re-summarize those in a summary email back to you and make sure that host has all that information. So then you really seal the deal and close that event off on a real high note. Because we haven't had, after sampling, 5 whiskeys, we haven't had an event where nobody's not had a good time by the end of it. Everybody's usually smiling, but they forget about what they talked about. And they're like, what was that one whiskey we tasted that they mentioned on it that wasn't in the tasting? What was that distillery they said to go visit? We summarize that in an email to the host to make sure that you can seal the deal on that event and really close it off and look good. So on the corporate side, we've had a number of client events where the business owners bringing in their private clients. We've done it a lot in the financial services industry. We actually had one fully in Canada. We had over 80 people on the Zoom, all from their home, and everything all taken care of. And the real big point at the end of the feedback came back was that follow-up email and just the rave reviews that were coming back to them saying, thank you for putting this together. This blew our minds. Getting us together like this and being able to go into breakout groups to keep things moving, so it feels like you're moving around. Not everybody's stagnant on a Zoom screen watching the Hollywood squares. We do people around in breakout groups. We do polls to keep things interesting, to keep people moving forward, especially since we're doing blind. Do you like it? Do you not? What kind of style do you think we just tasted? And at the end of the night, when we reveal all the whiskeys as we go through each tasting in summary, what was your favorite for the night? And we compare that to the poll at the beginning of what was your favorite style of whiskey before you even started.
One of the other things,
like one whiskey versus the other, and it's interesting to see how it goes through the night.
Yeah, one of the other things too, Tim, I think you should touch base on, because I know you've done at least one of these, and it's a great idea. And I don't know that we've fully got as many of these as we should. But there's nothing hotter than whiskey right now. I mean, whiskey is where it's at. People are interested in it. It's still young enough of a hobby, if you will, that there's still many people on the outside looking in and confused by it and a little bit overwhelmed. So putting together an event, and what I'd like to pitch for is like a charity event. So many are involved in charities and they're looking for unique ways to raise money. There's a great possibility to utilize one of these events to really put an excellent event together that draws some expertise in, where the charity that's usually ends up being so involved in these things can kind of just sit back, participate with the people that support their charity and have some fun as well, right, Tim?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we ended up out of the few charity events that we've done, we're averaging anywhere between 15 to 20,000 for a small event, and that's usually about 15 people, donors that want to come in. The charity picks the price, and then they usually have a fundraiser, a small fundraiser event tied to that. And that's all before one of the donors would match. So we've had one event where a donor actually matched the contributions of all the participants to gather a small fundraiser before their annual event, the real large kickoff. And they were just floored with how little work they had to do to be able to capture some money to put an event like this. Especially charities, or anybody who's fundraising's dying for events like this because they mostly would be in person.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks have already done the wine tastings. So in the wine tastings, everybody's getting bottles, and it ends up being one or two things. This is so unique and versatile that you can put this in a couple different ways. We can package it in a couple different ways that you can have unique events and fundraising tied to that, which really makes it an interesting way to do it and gather and spread your mission statement across the country So you're not tied to the local area if you normally do in-person events.
Yeah. And one of the things too that you can't overlook when you're talking about events and that type of thing, a charity event, so often they're tied to the weekend. And then everyone has conflicts during the weekend because people have lives outside of the charitable events and things like that. So, if I try to schedule something on Saturday night with my friends, so many of them are at the lake or other things, it's impossible to get them all together. But you can do these during the week because you're talking about the safety of your own home and where you're comfortable, an event where you bring it into people's homes, during the week is fine. And an event on a Wednesday that runs from 8 to 10 o'clock, you're also not up too late or anything like that. It's a great way to utilize an event where, and again, the charity doesn't have to do a whole lot.
Yeah, so correct. Yes, a lot of these events, so timeline wise, our content usually with an intro and then an outro from the host, you're looking anywhere between an hour and 15 to an hour 30, hour 45, depends on the chatter between the tastings of each spirit that we do, because a number of questions come up. And then we usually after that, we'll close the event down and leave the Zoom open for anybody who wants to talk and chat.
Yeah.
So that's when the real conversation starts coming, the real bonding with the groups, because we'll watch the folks as Patrick and I will pop into the different breakout groups during each of the tastings, trying to get a gauge of where everybody's at, what they're talking about, what questions they have. Then we'll bring those questions back into it, because a lot of folks will ask, they're afraid to ask in a large group of 30 people, 40 people on a Zoom, can I add water to my whiskey? I don't like it this hot. I'm not used to high proof alcohol. They don't like asking that in the large group, but in the small groups, they will. And then we'll take that information and bring it back out and say, we had an interesting question in our small group that I visited that, can you add water to your whiskey? So that it really allows you to get to the whiskey drinker or the spirit taster where they're at. Doesn't matter if they're a beginner or if they're consider themselves a connoisseur. They will pick up something on the education part of it, which is really critical. And how we always start our events is basically a step-by-step of how to taste high-proof spirits. And you can tie that to wine, you can tie that to food. So we go through a little bit of education of how to taste it first. And then we get into the different expressions and try to have some fun and try to have some guesses on what you think that spirit is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's good to talk about how to make this happen. So if you're interested in that, the starting point to contact us is abvnetwork.com. So check that out. That is, and there's a section called Bourbon Tasting events, and just click on that and it has all the information. It has a process flow, exactly how it works. It has a form to fill out to engage us and get us in the conversation where we start the consultation, and it lines out exactly what to expect each step of the way. So that's pretty good. Pricing is, we've got 3 tiers, and this is our basic program. So it is 3 tiers. Tier 1, and again, these are all minimum of 15 people. There's 5 items, and the cost for that is $75 plus shipping. So $75 per person plus shipping, of course, and that the average price of the whiskey that you'll be drinking is $50. Tier 2 is 4 items, and it's $100 person plus shipping. Average price of the whiskey that you'll be drinking is $80. And finally, tier 3, there it is $150 per person plus shipping, but the average price of the whiskey that you'll be tasting is $125 per bottle. That sum it up pretty good, Tim?
This does.
Yeah. And Tim mentioned too, and we're going to open it up for questions, but one of our ABV Network signature things is kind of the session after the session. As Tim mentioned, there's so much value to that there, because you can get off topic, and you never want to get your meeting off topic. You want to stay focused, and you want to respect people's times, but we make ourselves available after we stop the recording and ask us about anything, whether it's how to taste whiskey properly, like can I add water, or it can be, do you know anything that's going on in the world of bourbon, or we stay so engaged with the world of bourbon. We can tell you about that. Or if you want to know about the people of bourbon, we talk about that. Anything that you'd like to know, new products coming out. We're pretty in tune with everything going on in the world of bourbon. So it is a great thing. And of course, all of our events feature 2 presenters. So we've got at least 2 on there. So it's great to help manage the event itself, and comes off very professional. Any questions from our audience here today before we start to wrap this one up? About these events, anything that you'd like to know?
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Now, Steve, are these similar to your type of tastings in format in that it would, but it would move it into a private type tasting? Is that kind of what it would be similar to?
And I'll let Tim expand upon this, but Kind of yes and kind of no. I mean, in that you are tasting whiskey and you are getting a little bit of history on there. We tend to focus a little bit more on the history and the tasting. But Tim's literally and Patrick, they're walking through a step-by-step how to taste. We don't kind of get into those typically in my tasting. We just, because we get together all the time and it's mostly the same group. We kind of just focus on, tasting notes and engaging everyone, getting everyone involved in the tasting notes and things like that. And Tim, speak a little bit how else it might differ from our events that we do on a regular basis, a couple nights per week, versus what you do with a private tasting.
Yeah, sure. With the private tasting, as we started out, host will kick off the event, welcome everybody, turn it over to us, and then we will start with a poll. The poll is basically, what is your favorite style of whiskey right now? From Scotch all the way down to bourbon, White Claws. Give me the vodka. I don't like any of it. So we have a little fun with that, get an idea where people are at, and then we will take you through a tasting step by step of how to nose a whiskey. What does that mean? How when you taste a whiskey, what does that mean? What does a finish mean? And everybody's got a tasting sheet, just a basic tasting sheet. And we can send you examples if you'd like, but just a basic tasting sheet for them to identify basic flavors. Is it fruity, floral, vanilla, woody, or spicy? And they go break down each of the whiskeys. So what's different and unique than if you've been at an ABV network event is, like we said before, all the 5 samples, they all come in a bag. They're all blind with a random number on it. And then we will taste through that on a specific order that's randomized. And you don't know the whiskey until we all come back from breakout groups. So we'll say, okay, we're going to taste number 914. We're going to start out with 914. Then we'll break out everybody into small groups. They'll have about 5 to 7 minutes to taste the whiskey, go through it, have small chit chat with each other, talk about whatever they want to. Some people, they all know each other. They haven't seen each other in a while. They could be strangers. And then once we bring them back, we put up a poll and say, okay, what do you guess what the spirit may be? So everybody takes a guess. We bring the poll up, then we do a reveal. Then we'll show the picture of the whiskey, the bottle that we have. We'll have the bottle with us. And then we'll talk about the distillery. We'll give you some education on the distillery, how that whiskey was made, and what makes this whiskey unique. And then we'll break that down and just summarize some tasting notes that you may be getting. And again, it's all marketing people. So we're reading the marketing notes then. And then folks are starting to understand, oh, so that's what that feels like. And we'll also pair a lot of these tastings with either chocolate or shortbread, so people can taste it during the sessions too as well. So we'll do that 5 separate times if you're at the 5 spirit tasting session. So you don't know what's going in. Each time you come, you know which one you're tasting, but you do break out, and we randomize the groups as well. So every breakout group is different. So when we do break out in small groups, each of those are randomized. So you're going to have different people. So you're going to be able to touch everybody if you're a participant in there rotating around. And then we'll do a reveal after we come back. We'll talk about that distillery, and we add on a bit of education on each one. So for difference between, like, a Scotch will come up, we'll talk about malted barley. Why is this single malt? What makes Scotch Scotch? And then we'll compare that to an Irish whiskey and say, well, this is malted and unmalted barley. What we learned from malted barley and the difference here is this type of process. And so we'll go through the different process and education points. And once we finish through all the whiskeys, we put out there, what's your favorite? And then we kind of summarize the event. We learned pot still versus column still, chill filter versus unchill filter, and go through some of the education points to really tie it up. So what you're really getting is not just a whiskey tasting, but more of an education event. And that interest in trying new things. And a lot of the whiskeys that we have, very few people have ever tasted them before. We have Scotch lovers that don't like Scotch. They don't understand that Scotch doesn't have to have peated, dried malt in there. So they learn between peated whiskey and unpeated whiskey. They learn the different regions of Scotland, the different regions of Ireland, and some history on each of the different spirits behind it and the distiller behind it. So we get into those details on there. It pretty on the surface, but everybody takes away with each tasting as they go through one new fact that they may not have known before. And we go a little bit in depth, but try to keep the event moving along.
Yeah. So, a lot of differences there. And of course, Tim and Patrick do a great job of maximizing the technology. I'm not so good at the technology. I never break anybody into groups, subgroups within here. I don't do polls. I can turn it on and hit record. That's the extent of, and I can read the chat. So yeah, that's about all I know.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
All right. With all this going on, can we customize our event? That, I personally am a bourbon and rye guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just now touched into some of the gin, which I'm really kind of treading lightly on, because if it tastes like a pine tree, no. But anyway, I hate scotch, so that's what I'm saying is or if there's a Scotch and Canadian guy, I mean, doesn't matter. Can we personalize that and make sure it fits the group?
Sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's something that we would strive to do. And yes. Now, that being said, we're going to be giving away an event that's set as to what that is. Yeah, if you win that, it's not necessarily customized because that's all a setup thing that you're getting. So just want to make that clear when we do.
Yep.
That. So don't want to.
The benefits we have is I'm more on whiskey centric. Patrick is more gin centric and tequila centric. Mezcal. He's got other different spirits that he enjoys. For some reason I can't touch gin. I cannot agree with it. I can't find it. But we have had situations where folks just, I don't want scotch. Our folks don't like scotch. So can we substitute with something else? And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll look to substitute with something very local to that area that we can source to make it local. Because it's in that follow-up email that we send with the summary of the event, we also state where folks can pick up those bottles locally. And we will do the research. We will call some local liquor stores around where we know the host is at to make sure they know stuff's in stock if they have it in stock, because we may be sending 15, 20, 30 people their way if they go close. So we do look for those smaller liquor stores and distributors to make sure we tie with a local distillery or a local flavor and profile versus us holistically imposing what we feel you should be tasting every night.
Yeah. So if I wanted to do a all craft distiller around me here in St. Louis, so you could fit in something like that then.
Yep. As long as we can secure the bottles. Yeah.
Sounds good.
And we certainly can.
Problem with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. So Tim and Patrick are kind of in the greater Chicago area too, just so you know where they're out of is if you're looking at doing something with them. And it's possible to even do a live event to bring you guys in if you're in that area. You're not traveling. You're not going to get on a plane and fly out to San Diego. Well, you could if I guess if they're willing to pay for that. But yes, yeah. But for the most part, you're looking to kind of stay close to home base there. The Legend, did you have your hand up before? Did you have a question? I think you're on mute. I got to unmute that. He's in Key West, apparently.
Yeah, well, Tim, this is the same format that you use for the fundraiser tonight.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Because that went off flawlessly. That was a great event, and it was kind of neat because the 5 different whiskeys. Most of those I had not tried, so. It was also a learning experience even for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, Rick, because one of the things that we like to do is shine some light on the bottles that people skip over on the shelves.
Yeah.
Shine some light on either local stuff or stuff that even some, big whiskey fans have never tried. But we try to focus on both affordability and availability. It's key in the whiskeys that we use.
Yeah. No, I just the whole format and everything with the breakout sessions and everything else, it went flawlessly. And it was very enjoyable. I don't know why anybody wouldn't like it.
That's cool.
You guys do a great job.
Any other questions from our audience here?
I've got one.
Okay, go ahead, man.
So as far as the fundraising goes, the prices are set and we add to that price whatever we'd want for each ticket, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would bill all that in your bill and send us the difference, or do we just no, I'm sorry, you send the whole bill, we just keep the difference and just send
correct
you. Okay,
correct. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Hey,
there was
Steve, I have a question.
Sure, Tom.
Well, first, Steve, Tim, Patrick, thanks for sharing all this with us. With how long are the different tastings, the standards? Like you mentioned the 3 different tiers. How long does it typically take for about 15 people? How much time do we need to schedule?
We like to book it about between an hour, 15, hour and a half. We try to keep our content to about an hour and roll the small groups anywhere between 5 to 7 minutes. And then Patrick and I try to keep each other on target when we go off on a topic. Some questions come up. We have that when we come back from the breakout groups, there is a little bit of a question and answer session there that can get a little long. We try to make sure we keep on moving through it and save a lot of those extra questions after the event's over. So then people use their free time then. But generally, you're looking at about between an hour and 15 or an hour and a half of content with an intro. from the host. And then after that is really what you want to do. We actually extended the last event that we did for a client up in Canada. We actually extended and added a cocktail class to it as well. So we had one of our cocktail specialists that's part of the network. She had two dual cameras going. You can see what she's mixing. You can see what she's doing in front. And that event ended up being about 2.5 hours. And we were told to expand that out. So we can go as long or as short as you want. There's no shortage of education that we can provide when it comes down to it, and pace that we can do. But the quickest event we've done, trying to keep it really tight, and that was on mandate, was about 1.5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And the free time afterwards too. And so you end up can make the event as interactive and ask as many questions as you like to, because once we turn off off the recorder, we do stick around and just talk casually. So you kind
So
of
the free time after, Steve, I guess that's similar to like your other events.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's our signature, the way we do things. And we found that's just the best way to engage people on an informal basis after you do your formal presentation. It's good for us. It's good for the people that are on there. It's just, I think it's a great way to build that camaraderie between the two different entities there, the presenters as well as the audience. So
no, I love that aspect of it myself. And I guess one more question, Tim and Patrick, how do the breakout rooms work? Like what kind of breakout rooms do you set up?
Sure. So Zoom has a fantastic capability where we can actually take a group of, let's say it's a big event of 50 people, and we can break them into 10, breakout groups of 5 people each. And basically there will be a little button that you click to accept to join the room. You will join 4 other participants in kind of like your mini, like a mini other Zoom, right? And then you guys will be able to taste the spirit, talk, trade tasting notes, ask questions. And after a certain allotment of time, we'll bring everybody back to the big group and kind of debrief. And while everybody's in breakout groups, Tim and I do the best that we can to kind of jump in to every other group and answer any questions that may have come up. But we really like the breakout groups for a couple of reasons. The first being, with Zoom, it kind of feels like you're standing up and walking to a different room. Mm-hmm. And, also, if we're doing an in-person event with 50 people, usually you're sitting in the same seat and talking with the same people the whole time. This way, you get to meet with, a bunch of different people throughout the evening or the event. And I think we touched on this earlier also. People are a lot easier in asking questions in a smaller group setting. So we find that we get a lot of interesting questions that we may not get without those breakout groups. So they've been really effective for us. People seem to really like them. And it's a big part of what we do.
Great. Thank you.
That's great. Any other questions? Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, we did say we're going to give one away, Tim. So tell us a little bit about what you're giving away tonight, so we can set the expectations, exactly what they're happening. Again, it's not an event where it's just open, it's customized. This is something that you put together specifically, so it's kind of like buying a package that's already set. So tell them a little bit about what to expect.
Correct. So you've got a 15 person 5-spirit blind whiskey tasting. There is a Scotch and Irish, a Canadian, an American rye, and a bourbon that's in there. All randomly numbered, like we have here, already sealed and prepped and ready to go. Distribution wise, we can handle it all ourselves and distribute individually or to one person, and you can distribute locally. Well, we do find a lot of our business clients enjoy hand delivering the packages, the gift bags to their clients too, as well, or the people that are participating in it too, as well. So they have that interaction with them on top, kind of a pre-event conversation. But this one's all prepackaged, ready to go to the winner, and scheduled whenever you see fit to collect yourself and 14 of your closest friends or business colleagues or clients and prospects.
Very good. Very good. All right. What we'll do next, we will give away the drawing. Tim, do you have a random number generator? Or you want me to use mine? I've got one here.
I do not have one, Steve. Would you mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a list here. These are the tickets, the names of everybody. So it's on a list, but you have to be present to win. So we didn't want to just have a bunch of people sign up and then, they're not even here. It's to give away, people that are part of this. So if we draw someone who got a ticket, but is not on this event, we'll redraw. Okay. So, and matter of fact, there's the top one and the bottom one. So I'm starting them going 2 to 11, even though we've got 12 on the list here. So we'll hit generate here. It'll give us the number 7, and I can look, and number 7.
Lucky number 7.
Danny Kennard.
Look at that.
Danny Kennard. How about that? So, Danny, we'll get you. Maybe we'll expand your
drinker yet, Danny. Trust me.
Maybe we'll expand Danny's whiskey palate because he said he didn't like Scotch and some of the other ones. So we'll see. Yeah. Just because it's blind, he'll pick out the Scotch and be like, this one is the best, and it's a good bourbon, and it turns out it's a Scotch.
Steve, I'm glad you point that out because that's the reason why we do it blind.
Yeah, that stuff happens in these blind things. I know it. We've seen all kinds of stuff. So, Danny, you'll be able to invite your friends. You tell us, work with Tim, get them your list of buddies, and you'll have a sign on and set that event up when you can. Okay. Oh, there you go. Congratulations, Danny. How about that? Very cool. With that, we're going to say goodbye. We're going to wrap this one up. But of course, it is an ABV Network event. We'll stick around if you have any questions want to know anything about the world of bourbon. We'll be here and available for you guys. But for right now, we'll say goodbye and thanks for attending. Appreciate it.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Thank you.